Howdy guys, Rex here. So we're just finishing up the RX-1000 class. This is one of our students' rifles, and we want to give you an example of what can happen after you hammer some rounds downrange. Also, after what happens when this rifle cools down, if you leave it in the car and it gets cold at night, like freezing, and then when it warms back up, stuff can get loose, okay? So with, when stuff gets warm, it typically grows. When stuff gets cold, it typically shrinks. That can work screws loose. So that equipment inspection list we give you, where we tell you to tighten your action screws and check them every time when you get out in the field, is actually very important, because observe this. This rifle was shooting lights out yesterday when we left the range. It was grouping, it was dusting clay pigeons on the first shot at 500 yards, within 0.1 or 0.2 at 1,000. It was grouping like this, 10 shots at 100 yards, no problem. And so, but now, I don't know if you guys can see this. This is loose. So our action screws, see if you can look in the action there. The action screws came loose just from sitting there in the car and after hammering some rounds downrange. So these the thread pitch on these screws is going to hammer together with use. So don't just assume your screws are tight. You always want to check them each time. Snug them up, get out your torque wrench, make sure you got the proper torque specs, usually around 60 or 65 inch-pounds back here, maybe 40 or vice versa, 60 or 65 inch-pounds here, maybe 40 back here, and make sure everything's tight. Also, we did have the scope as well, the ocular, which this deal is not supposed to turn. There's actually an ocular adjustment right here. And so the student had the, hold on, let's see if I can tighten it up. There, see, here's how you normally adjust the ocular, right? So this is how you adjust the ocular. And just because of the stiffness of this whole back end actually come loose, okay? And so that's not a good deal. So that's something that's supposed to be kind of centered like this, with your indication mark on top. I presume they wanted this over here, but it was loose. So stuff can come loose when you're not expecting it. Also, the bipod came loose. So if you actually shoot like a bunch of rounds to your rifle in a class like that, you will find the stuff that comes loose. A lot of guys are tempted to Loctite right away. I like to let everything hammer in first, to where like the threads actually get the full engagement. There's a slight amount of deformation that's going to happen on freshly cut screws, and in the holes, you drill and tap it, and everything's got to seat likewise with the stock in the action, how they made together. There's a certain amount of compression and deformation in the materials. It'll all bed itself. So I like to bed things and then screw them tight, shoot it a bunch, double check your torque, and once you stop getting any more turn on them screws, then you can go ahead, if you want, particularly in the base and the screws and all that, and go ahead and apply Loctite. But you want to make sure that you have all the wiggle out of it first. Otherwise, Loctite will actually trick you, and you're thinking it's tight and it's not, because the Loctite's got it tight, but it's actually loose in there. So we need to tighten that up. All right, this is actually a good shooting rifle in the course, a Bergara, and it was lights out. Also, the cheek piece is loose here too. I don't know if you noticed that. Maybe that's because we pulled the bolt out. But the scope, actually, this did come undone as well. So when you hammer stuff and use it a lot, you'll find that during standard static range conditions, something works great, but after you get some use out of it, you got to go back through and continuously inspect your weapon, make sure everything's good. Likewise with your bipod. I'd also check the brake here. Good thing this APA is screwed on here nice and good. But good shooting rifle, we'll just tighten it back up.